The heavy front door rattled again as he knocked, a sharp, demanding sound that always made my chest tighten. I peeked through the peephole to find my husband standing on the welcome mat, a pristine stuffed giraffe tucked under his arm like a prop. When I opened the door, he immediately tried to step past me into the foyer, his face tight with the familiar irritation he used to display whenever I failed to anticipate his needs. "You cannot keep my son from me," he muttered, his voice dropping into that low, dangerous register he used whenever he wanted to remind me who held the power. I stood my ground, keeping my hand firmly on the brass handle. "Your scheduled visit is this Saturday," I replied, keeping my voice as flat and even as possible. He scoffed, looking over my shoulder at the small hallway. "I am his father, and I do not need a piece of paper telling me when I can see my own child." The silence that followed stretched out between us, thick with years of unspoken resentment and old habits I was finally learning to break. I watched him closely, noting the slight tremor in his hands and the way his eyes avoided mine, darting instead to the living room where the soft sounds of a baby monitor hummed. For 12 years, I had shrunk myself to fit into the spaces he left behind, always choosing peace over conflict, always believing that if I just managed our lives perfectly enough, he would finally become the partner I needed. But looking at him now, holding a toy he had likely bought at a drugstore down the street just to prove a point, the old fear simply failed to materialize. "You had every opportunity to be his father," I said quietly, "and you chose a presentation instead." He flinched slightly, the memory of that dark bedroom evidently still holding some weight, though his expression hardened almost instantly. "This is ridiculous. You are using our child to punish me for one mistake," he snapped, his voice rising enough to make me glance back toward the nursery. I did not raise my voice. Instead, I simply looked at the stuffed animal under his arm, noticing the price tag still dangling from its ear. "One mistake does not last 5 months, and it does not involve empty bank accounts," I told him, matching his glare with a steadiness that seemed to catch him off guard. He opened his mouth to argue, to deploy another one of the smooth explanations that had kept me trapped for so long, but then he stopped, realizing the old scripts were no longer working. The court hearing a week later was nothing like the dramatic confrontations you see on television, just as my lawyer had promised. There were no gasps from the gallery, no sudden confessions, just the sterile smell of fluorescent lights and the rhythmic shuffling of manila folders on dark wood tables. The judge was a tired-looking woman with half-moon reading glasses who spent more time reviewing my meticulous spreadsheets than listening to the emotional appeals Brian's attorney attempted to make. As I sat next to Margaret, watching the court reporter type out the clinical details of our failed marriage, I realized that the truth did not need to be loud to be effective. It just needed to be documented, date by date, dollar by dollar. When the financial investigation findings were finally read into the record, the full scope of what he had done became undeniably clear. The unauthorized transfers, the company accounts he had manipulated to fund his weekends away, the deliberate attempt to leave me financially stranded while I recovered from major surgery, it was all there, laid bare in black ink. Brian sat across the room, his shoulders slumped in a way I had never seen before, his eyes fixed firmly on the table as his lawyer scrambled to offer justifications. The realization that his carefully constructed public image was shattering in front of a stranger seemed to age him by 10 years in the span of 10 minutes. The final custody ruling reflected exactly what was best for our son, establishing a strict, structured visitation schedule that prioritized stability over his spontaneous demands. We left the courthouse through separate exits, the bright afternoon sun striking the concrete plaza outside with a clarity that felt almost shocking after hours in the dim courtroom. As I buckled Ethan into his car seat in the back of my old sedan, his small fingers reached out to catch the sleeve of my sweater, his grip surprisingly strong for someone so small. I took a deep breath, the air smelling faintly of rain and the sweet cinnamon from the bakery across the street, realizing the weight on my chest was finally gone. Months later, as I watched my son take his first clumsy steps across the living room floor toward a waiting neighbor, I understood that the true cost of leaving had nothing to do with what I had lost. The pearl bracelet, the old house, the illusion of a perfect family, they were just things I had discarded to make room for something authentic. The road ahead was still long, filled with early mornings and the quiet anxieties of raising a child on my own, but the foundation beneath my feet was finally solid. I had spent years trying to arrange the perfect life, only to discover that the most beautiful things are often the ones you have to rebuild from the ground up.